no place to escape to.
This is the last podcast.
On the left.
Live from your glade.
That's when the cannibalism started.
What was that?
Boys. Why do boys commit so many crimes?
Well, they're bored, I think.
Is that, no, why do young boys grow into men and then do all of these crimes? Women hide them so much better.
Yeah, that's true. People aren't looking for women to commit crimes. Everyone's looking for boys. We're all pre-criminals until proven otherwise.
I had a listener send me a casting breakdown of the new Belle Gunnis movie. You're gonna love this. There's the whole thing coming up. They're searching for a name only for Belle Gunnis, but the way they described her was tall, buxom, sensual. Like, these are the words that they used.
What?
That she was a lithe panther that from on one side was a purring cat, a velveteen cat, and the other a deadly adversary. And I was like, who is writing this?
They got it all wrong. That is horrible. Hey, what's up, everyone? How are you? Welcome to Last Podcast on the Left, Relaxed Fit. I am hanging out with the beautiful Marcus Parks, and of course, we also have Henry Zabrowski in sunny Los Angeles.
Yep.
And today's guest for the show is our favorite true crime author in the world, Harold Schechter.
Whoa!
Thank you so much for joining us, Harold.
Thank you, man.
Very excited to be here. Say, I got a question. What Belle Gunnis movie were you just referring to?
It was a breakdown. It's not the new one, because I know there's like a big one coming out that I believe Charlize Theron is Belle Gunnis. It's like
She
one of
can't
those
be
where they
Belle Gunnis, though.
They just put a fat suit on her, and then they say that she's incredible, you know? But I got this breakdown, I have to find the actual listing, but it was Belle Gunnis, and describing her as essentially like, the only way to put it was she was a lot of vagina from Austin Powers.
You know what? I don't think that there should be fat suits allowed in Hollywood. If you wear a fat suit, you're not eligible for the Bachelor or for the Oscar. It's factual appropriation. It's fat cultural appropriation, and I don't like it.
We've already began this off the rails.
Well, Harold's new book, The Ragged Stranger, The Hero, the Hobo, and the Crime That Shocked Jazz-Age Chicago, is now available on Kindle and is free with Kindle Unlimited, clocking in at a brisk 75 pages. Ooh. The Ragged Stranger is a tale that, personally, I would kind of describe as like a 1920s analog to the Scott Peterson case. But with even more twists and turns throughout. So, Harold, how did you find the story of The Ragged Stranger, and what was it about the story that compelled you to tell it?
By the way, yeah, it's funny you should say Scott Peterson, because just a little while ago, I was trying to think of recent analogs, and Scott Peterson was the first that came to my mind also. But, I'm not sure, I'm so immersed in the history of American crime that I'm never sure exactly where I come across references to some of these things. But back in the 1940s, there was a comic book called Crime Doesn't Pay, which you guys might have seen, which was one of these incredibly lurid, sensationalistic comic books marketed to young children under the pretext that they were going to be edified in some way.
It's so much fun, though. Now everyone's mad about it. They're saying true crime content's doing that now. Like, now true crime content is making everything easy for children to digest, but it's been happening forever.
Oh, yeah.
Kids would read these magazines, read these comic books, and thought, wow, crime doesn't really pay. Meanwhile, they're totally getting off on these, incredibly lurid, sensationalistic comic books. This is before the comic book code. Anyway, one of these stories and one of the issues was the Carl Wanderer case. I think that's where I first came across it. And, it was one of the most sensational crimes of the 1920s, but one that very few people have heard of.
It's nice because it evens out being called a nerd for reading a comic book in public. Mm-hmm. It'd be like, yeah, you think I'm a nerd? You think this is a comic book? This is teach me how to gut you.
So this was like can you hit some of the points of of this shooting, just so we could talk about it a little bit without spoiling the whole thing, so that people can kind of understand the structure of this crime?
Well, I'll try to avoid too many spoilers, although it's hard. But basically, Wanderer had been a soldier. He was a soldier during this expedition down in Mexico, and then during World War I, he fought in France when the United States entered World War I, which was like 1918. Came back, married basically his childhood sweetheart, who immediately got pregnant, and then he decided. What happened was they went out to a movie one day, and when they returned home, a very raggedy homeless guy followed them into the vestibule of their building and was about to hold them up. Wanderer pulled out the service revolver he always carried and started shooting this guy. And this guy was also shooting, supposedly, the gun he was carrying. Anyway, when all the gunfire stopped, the mugger was dead, and Wanderer's pregnant wife was dying. And Wanderer was hailed as a hero for having killed this thief who had shot his wife.
Well, you never know what's going to happen in a vestibule.
Vestibules can be very scary. I've been in this there. Especially with the lights out. Anyway, so Wanderer was hailed as his hero. This guy had held him up. Wanderer pulled out his gun, shot the bad guy, but unfortunately not before the bad guy shot Wanderer's wife. That was a story that was in all the newspapers. It turned out there was more to the tale than.
Oh, okay. So this is very similar, where he has been labeled, but in reverse, where like Scott Peterson was immediately the villain, but it's all centered on a very sweet woman that just managed to just be in the crosshairs of a bunch of people that wanted her dead for being pregnant.
Well, ultimately, yes. I mean, so can I go ahead and do the spoilers?
Sure. I mean,
if you want
to. It really is like it's a fantastic story, even with the spoilers. It's great.
Well, it turned out, there were just all these, like suspicious things about Wanderer's story. Like altogether, there were 10 bullets fired in this tiny vestibule. He came away without a scratch. Meanwhile, these other two people were lying dead. This was a very no-holds-barred time in American tabloid journalism. And you had all these, rabid news hounds following the story. Anyway, they managed to discover that the Colt semi-automatic pistol that supposedly this homeless guy had been carrying and wielding actually belonged to Carl Wanderer's cousin.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You got to wipe the gun. You got to clean the numbers.
You got to do something.
And they also discovered that Carl Wanderer had borrowed it from his cousin earlier on that afternoon. Anyway, turned out, when he finally confessed, that the whole thing was a plot by Wanderer to get rid of his wife.
Damn.
This is where the Scott Peterson analogy comes in, and, a whole bunch of. So what he had done was he had gone out, he had found this, street guy, said he had a job for him, offered him some money, said, all you got to do is follow me and my wife home, and then pretend to hold us up.
Oh, poor bastard. He didn't know. He was just trying to go along to get along and get a job or something, but never have a job where you have to voluntarily just wave a gun around.
Yeah. Well, the newspapers kept calling him the poor boob. Because
oh, that is the worst. He's dead, and they're calling him the poor boob.
That's what he came to be known as.
Oh, and of course, we are talking about Harold Schechter's most recent book. It's a tiny one, so you can get through it very quickly over your lunch break.
Yeah, I read it in a couple hours. It's full of amazing characters. Like Carl Wanderer himself is such a strange rich character.
And the name of that book is Ragged Stranger. So make sure you get out there and support Harold Schechter's new venture. I'm sure it'll be very exciting, and I'm sure there's much more in the book than you've already talked about.
Yes, quite a bit more. Well, you know how they discovered the crime. Then, you know, he had 3 separate trials, Carl Wander, all of which are pretty interesting. And it turned out that the reason he decided to get rid of his 9 months pregnant wife was he wanted to go back to the army and hang around with other guys.
What? Wait, what? That is the craziest reason ever to not have a family.
Yeah. Well, they thought, you know, it's because he had a girlfriend. And he was sort of seeing this other young lady, but basically it was because he just wanted to hang around with other guys.
Yeah.
Was it a like slapping butts thing, having fun in the shower, dropping the soap on purpose? What was going on? Why did he want to go back into the military?
Yeah, well, it was a little ambiguous. You know, some people felt very, very strongly that there was a distinct homoerotic element to this fantasy, especially after Wanderer said that he couldn't stand the thought of touching his wife.
But a lot of guys, from what I was actually just recently reading an account of a man who came home from the war, or he came home from Afghanistan, and he said the main thing, he said camaraderie, which does sound like maybe it's light fraudage happening like on the front line, but it's the also like the order and it's adventure, it's anything but walking around like in a suburban life, this quote unquote like I've settled down. I used to be a warrior, like literally a warrior, and now I'm here doing all of this stuff, and I can't smoke cigars inside anymore and curse. And because
I think it's more the killing people. They can't kill. They can still smoke cigars inside. But Marcus, what do you want to talk to Harold about?
Well, I definitely want to keep talking about this a little bit. In addition to just the crime itself, like a lot of The Ragged Stranger is about how the media covered the crime at the time. So how do you think true crime coverage has changed at all, or if at all, from 100 years ago to the way they covered, say, like the Scott Peterson case or the Casey Anthony case?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about, the 1920s, again, was really the golden age of tabloid journalism. And, you had, I don't know if you ever saw the movie The Front Page, which these 2 Chicago journalists, Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur, who went on to become incredibly successful Hollywood screenwriters, they first became big writing this big smash hit Broadway play called The Front Page, which was made into several different movies, and also very famously a version with Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell called His Girl Friday. But these guys were these bare-knuckle journalists who would go to extraordinary lengths, to turn up to investigate these crimes. They were, often doing more investigation and more successful investigation than the police were, and then turn it into, these incredibly lurid stories. I mentioned in The Ragged Stranger, one of Charles MacArthur's famous stories had to do with a Chicago dentist who'd been accused of molesting one of his patients, and the headline was, "Dentist fills wrong cavity."
That was an episode of Seinfeld as well. Remember that?
So, so on the one hand, again, you're talking about a certain kind of journalism, a certain kind of very, very sensationalistic journalism that, again, defined the tabloids back then and still defines tabloid media today.
So you think it's less classless now than it was in the 1920s? Because we have some pretty sensational headlines. I remember I'm always struck by, I think it was 17 people killed in the Upper West Side, and the headline was West Side Gory, which is just like a lot of people are dead, but they're just in the room trying to find this ridiculous theatrical pun. Right. Do you think it was more crass back in the 20s?
No, it wasn't necessarily. Look, I mean, I remember back in the 70s, I forget what it was, either the Post or the News, famous headline, "Headless Body and Topless Bar."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're always going to have this sensationalism. A lot of it now is not in print journalism, right? I mean, a lot of it now,
Right.
yeah. So, and there's always something inherently sensationalistic about covering gruesome, gory, true crimes. It partly depends on how much you want to exploit that. So, I don't think I really think the only changes in true crime, how we digest it, how we experience it, are mostly technological now. The appetite for reading about this stuff or watching about this stuff hasn't changed. I mean, that's just part of human nature. That goes back even before there was such a thing as print. Back in the pre-Gutenberg era, there were these murder ballads. I'm sure you know about them. I mean, every time a gruesome murder happened, somebody would turn it into a song or a poem. And many of those are incredibly gruesome and sensationalistic. Right. So really, human nature doesn't change. The appetite for true crime doesn't change. The way true crime is presented doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the technology of transmission.
I guess out of my own self-interest, I do have a question regarding last podcast on the left. Obviously, you've listened to some episodes. We deliver the true crime news in a way that may have never existed before. I'm just interested to hear what your thoughts were when you first heard us talking about true crime in the way that we do. Were you like, this is a total bastardization of everything I love and worked so hard for? Or did you sort of like the sugar to help the medicine go down?
No. I saw you guys in a certain kind of tradition. I remember back in the, I guess, 70s also, maybe later, there was a fanzine called Murder Can Be Fun.
I love Murder Can Be Fun. I love it. Yeah. You can still get, I love that. It's a great zine out there.
I mean, one of the things that people are reluctant to admit to, but I think it's important to admit to, is that this is a form of entertainment. When you hear these stories about true crime, you guys are, just very, very open about that, and that's great. I think people should accept that in themselves. One of the things I'm always struck by, when I meet people who've read my work and so on and so forth, people often rationalize their fascination with true crime.
I'm interested in the human condition and the way the human mind works, and I do believe that is up to a point. But
sure,
you also like hearing about people getting their heads chopped off a little bit.
Yeah, basically, it's how you tell stories about these crimes. People want to hear stories. I mean, you guys tell your stories in this incredibly engaging way. So.
Well, thank you
very
for
much.
saying nice things. do you get hit up in the true crime arena? I feel like there's a lot of people, because we do it all too, right? Because we also do the paranormal and we do the all various aspects of macabre things. So we have a whole swath of different people that we reach and people that are interested in the show. Do you yourself get reached out to by a lot of like interesting, quote unquote, interesting people? Like, do you get reached out to by a lot of like goth chicks and psychos who want to kill you and stuff like that? Or people who'd be like, I want you to write a book about me. I'll show you the evidence.
Yeah. Not infrequently. I will get emails or whatever. I'm not a social media person, but I'm not on Facebook, but I have a Facebook page that somebody else basically keeps for me. And if somebody contacts me, should forward it. So, yeah, I mean, I'll often, or not infrequently, be contacted by somebody who has this amazing story about how her uncle was killed by a serial killer or whatever. And maybe I want to write a book about it. Things like that.
Give it to me. Give me the material.
But isn't that sad, though, that you have to tell that person, yeah, it's just not that exciting of a murder. And it's like they've already lost their uncle or their father or their brother, and they're just like, you kind of lose twice, because pretty standard stuff.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of have my standard answer, which is basically true. I mean, I write historical true crime. My books are almost entirely, my full-length books are pretty much all about people who are no longer alive. You know, it goes
Right.
back to the 19th century or the 20s or then. I think probably the most recent criminal I covered was Ed Gein. You know, that was like 1957. So
Yeah, that's what I was like. What is it about historical true crime that, piques your interest so much? Like, why is it that historical true crime is what you decided to focus on?
well, partly it's it has to do in a way with my academic background. I mean, one of the reasons I became an English professor is I love doing research. And doing this historical true crime allows me both to gratify my own morbid interests and my own, interest in extreme psychological criminal aberration and horror. With my again sort of scholarly interest in doing a lot of digging around and doing a lot of research. So, the other thing is. And again, this goes, I think, also to your show. There are so many incredibly gruesome crimes. If you read newspapers at any time and any day, you'll come across horrific crimes.
Yep.
But there are a certain number of crimes that there are these amazing stories, and there are these amazing stories that take place in certain eras. And in a way help illuminate certain eras. Like The Ragged Stranger, tells you a lot about tabloid journalism in the 1920s. So I'm always interested in what the particular crimes that fascinate people have to say about that particular era. So
I also like how you put. We were speaking. I believe we saw you speak several years ago, and then recently you were said something about the idea. But you love telling the stories of these grand villains, like true living monsters, like H.H. Holmes, Albert Fish, these like legends essentially that became real. And it's where do you see that now? Like, do you ever aim towards something contemporary, or does history really allow those stories to unfold, and then you can see more of the context? Is that why? Does that help, or would you be able to have the same sort of resource materials if you were going after somebody more recent?
Well, theoretically, again, I'm interested in when I first started writing in this genre. If you read my Ed Gein book, for example, or Albert Fish book, I don't even use the word serial killer because nobody was using the term back then. And I mean, it had started to enter the language, but, it hadn't become this big, huge thing. I thought I was inventing a new genre. I thought of it as true horror more than true crime because I'm interested in writing about, these very rare psychos who take on the stature of these mythic monsters. And it's interesting to me, again, why certain criminals achieve that kind of status in the culture. So, I look for certain cases, again, it's in a book I've just finished. I've just finished a book about the worst school massacre in U.S. history, something called the Bath School Disaster of 1927, And I begin the book by talking about this horrific crime that happened in Connecticut a few years ago. It was on the national news. It was covered by NBC News, where these two guys broke into the house of this doctor.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, that was disgusting.
Yeah, and he ended up burning, the wife and the kids alive, and they made the wife go take all this money out in the ATM. Now,
The father survived, and he was on Oprah Winfrey, and then that episode was very traumatic.
Yeah, but I defy you. I can't even, and I was just rereading my own manuscript to name the two guys who did it.
Yeah,
Right.
That's so fucked up. I don't know why I can't remember their name. I was like, just so funny. I was thinking, like, why do I not remember their names? Because they don't have the bio. They don't have the villain description.
Yeah, I mean, there's something, again, it's this incredibly appalling crime, but somehow, the story of those two guys, except for this appalling crime, is totally uninteresting.
Yeah.
Where, you talk about an Ed Gein, and obviously there are these much more recent figures like Ted Bundy or Henry Lee Lucas, who have achieved that kind of status. So, it's not just like guys from the way distant past.
Right.
But again, it's a little, I think in a way, the most recent examples of American criminals who have achieved that kind of thing are the Columbine killers.
Yeah.
Can't think of anybody more recent than that. I mean, maybe, the Sandy Hook shooting, but
Right.
definitely Columbine killers, I mean,
Yeah, of course.
they set out to be legends, and they kind of have achieved that.
Well, I guess speaking of Columbine, I mean, obviously Eric and Dylan, they sort of represented the 1990s in a way, the late 90s, the sort of disgruntled youth movement, those kinds of things. Is there any correlation, or like, how would you view, if you're just looking at true crime through the lens of history, is there any difference between the true crime of the 20s? We're talking about World War I, late 30s, World War II, Vietnam, the 60s counterculture. Is there any, if you're just looking at true crime through modern history of America, is there any differences within the crimes that sort of reflect the new reality that they're taking place in?
Well, I think what's interesting is not so much, that there are differences in crimes, although, for whatever reason, for example, there was, starting in the late 70s into the 80s, what I think of as this golden age of serial murder. I mean, there was something in the culture,
I'm just so happy we can say that on this show.
Well,
Yes.
we're now in the golden age of the mass shooter.
Oh, wow. That's really wow.
We're not in the serial killer ages back then. We're now in mass shooter days.
Oh, wonderful.
That's absolutely true. And, the other thing, that is interesting to me is, not so much. I mean, I do think there were certain cultural conditions that produced people like Gacy and the Hillside Stranglers and Dahmer and all those people. But what's interesting is why certain types of crimes become these cultural obsessions.
Mm-hmm.
Because there, I think that does reflect some kind of large, free-floating cultural anxiety of the time. I think I first became aware of this when I was doing a book years ago called The Devil's Gentleman about this notorious poison murder case that happened around 1900. And I discovered, that in the late 19th century, around the turn of the 20th century, poison murderers were like what serial killers became like in the 1970s. The culture was just obsessed with these poison murders, even though, as with serial killers, there was they represented a tiny infinitesimal fraction of crimes. But if you read the newspapers, it was like there was this incredible epidemic of poison murders. And what I concluded was, that Americans were kind of obsessed with this because the poison murderer embodied or incarnated this very widespread anxiety, about all this toxic stuff.
Right.
That you never knew what food you were going to eat. This is pre-FDA, was going to kill you. So there was all this anxiety about ingesting poison. And, the poison murderer became, again, this mythic incarnation, the boogeyman, of this cultural anxiety. In the same way the serial killer did, I think, in the sexually freewheeling 1970s and 80s and so on and so forth. So,
And now you don't only really be worried about poison as if you're married and you have a really strong life insurance policy somewhere in there, because that's my main fear.
I don't understand life insurance. I'm not giving anyone a payout when I die.
well, that's very generous of you.
So, Harold, going back a little bit to what were you saying about the sensationalism of journalism back in the 20s and even back into the 1800s? Like, you do a ton of historical research. And I know when we're looking at a story and we're trying to figure out the character of a guy, like sometimes you'll see one detail that you don't see anywhere else. It's just in one source, but it changes the entire content. It changes the entire story. If this one detail is true, then the entire story changes. Like when you're doing historical research, how do you decide whether to go with that detail or not?
Yeah, that's a good question. Back in the late 19th century, in particular, when you had back then pre-tablet, it was called yellow journalism, as you probably know.
I remember my high school history class a little bit. There's some bits in there.
Yeah, I don't remember studying that in high school history, but that's good. Yeah, I mean, those people had no qualms about making shit up, So, generally speaking, before I would include something like that, I would try to find if there were any other corroborating sources, or if this just was one thing that appeared in one newspaper or whatever, because really you can't always trust that stuff. Is that never let a fact get in the way of a good story. So, so you do have to be careful.
And I guess the inverse of that, have you ever left out details because they didn't fit a narrative you wanted to sort of portray?
No, I don't think I have. I mean, I might have possibly, I can't think of an example. I might have tried to present that fact in a certain way, in a certain light, but I mean, I don't recall ever discovering wow, Ed Gein didn't really dig up those bodies. But
Right.
That would suck. So you don't feel like they're like, man, I can throw out all of this bullshit now.
I actually got to take that back a little bit, because by the time I got to the end of my book on H.H. Holmes, I had kind of concluded, and I still feel this way, that 90% of what was written about him, what I even wrote about him, certainly what appears in The Devil in the White City, was actually probably not true.
Ooh. Like what? What are the
Yeah,
what's the worst offensives of Devil in the White City?
I really hope that Minnie and Nanny are true.
They probably are true, but what I have grave doubts about is that anybody was killed in his hotel.
Really?
Well, I mean, I think, Minnie and Nanny, but I mean, all this stuff about, that it was this murder hotel and all these people were coming to visit the World's Fair and then disappearing. I sort of think that was kind of made up by the newspapers.
But then H.H. Holmes is just a guy who runs a bad pharmacy.
No, he's just an insurance scam.
Well, I mean, he was definitely a serial killer. And I believe he probably was responsible for at least 7 deaths, including the Heitzel children and so on and so forth. But, it's like there's no historical. You figure if he's killing all these people who are coming to the World's Fair, some family member would have inquired what happened to their husband, brother, cousin. You know what I mean? There's nothing to indicate that anybody ever filed a missing persons report, about anybody who came to the World's Fair and stayed at, rented a room at home.
Yeah, that's because they all took out life insurance and everyone was secretly happy that they're dead.
You hadn't thought about that possibility.
Well, was there any corroborating evidence with all the contractors who said that he had me build this strange chute and he had this other guy build this room with no? Was there any corroboration with those guys?
There was some corroboration about that, but again, first of all, if you look at pictures of the castle, it's just this little building.
Yeah.
But the other thing was, probably Holmes did, hire and fire contractors. I mean, he was a con man. Other people have done that, including our current president. But, I'm sure I'm sure there were staircases that didn't lead anywhere, and weird things. But you can see that the newspapers immediately turned these into this incredibly sinister thing.
Right.
There'd be some shoot or something, and then suddenly it became, a shoot leading down to this torture dungeon and so on and so forth. A lot of that stuff was just wild fantasy.
Well, I am happy that the media did portray it in that way, though, because I think without that portrayal of H.H. Holmes's torture mansion, we wouldn't have nothing but trouble. I don't think that Dan Aykroyd would have come up with that beautiful structure they had in the film, the home that they did the Humpty in.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, again, that famous line from the John Ford movie, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, when the truth becomes legend, print the legend. So,
Right. I mean, I'm with that. I was always I don't know if you could tell, I was a 14-year-old devotee to Hunter S. Thompson. So at some point at my young age, his whole concept of the gonzo form of telling a story, that be like sometimes just the gist, even though it's not necessarily technically full of actual hard facts. Sometimes it can be very, it can be accurate, and it's just more fun.
Totally. Well, I used to teach a class before I retired and started playing Red Dead Redemption all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I used to teach a class on myth, and I would quote the last line of the first chapter of Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where the narrator says, "It's the truth, even if it didn't happen." So, sometimes you can get at these deeper truths, even by presenting facts in a certain way that aren't strictly historically accurate. So.
Can I ask you something about truth? This is a question we've wrestled quite a bit on the show, and this is really just about your opinion. I don't know whether or not you're going to know for certain or what you have ever had kind of drag up in your research. How much credit do you give the confessions of serial killers? I was like we were talking about this quite often because Ted Bundy at the very end decided to tell everybody that he was a cannibal. All these types of things where how often or not is a serial killer's confessions just extended fantasies? And in what cases have you seen confessions be corroborated by stuff you've dug up? Like we were just saying how you basically showed that H.H. Holmes, the whole story about the inside of the hotel might be a sham, where it's how do you feel, how often are these guys just making up shit?
Very often.
Yeah.
I mean, H.H. Holmes, he published a confession, that he was paid all this money by William Randolph Hearst. And, when you read it and look at the stories that had been published before, he was just giving Hearst, the story that he was being paid to give him. You've all seen, I'm sure, that recent Netflix thing on Henry Lee Lucas. I mean, that's
Right.
It's wild. I just finished it last night, and because we covered Henry Lee Lucas years ago, and so now you relook at it and be like, man, the two dumbest men in the world took the Texas law enforcement for the ride of the century.
Yeah. Well, Lucas is obviously a very extreme case. But the thing about most serial murderers is, they're psychopathic con artists, and their word is just not to be trusted. I think, one of the rare exceptions to that was Jeffrey Dahmer, because I think Dahmer also did experience some genuine remorse, which was also unusual for those people. And I think that, he really wanted, as much as anything else, to try to understand himself and what drove him to his crimes. But for the most part, Gacy, all those people, Bundy, you just can't believe a word they're saying. Yeah.
What did you think about the questioning of Ed Gein? When they were asking him about, did you ever put the vaginas near your penis and dance around? And he just said things like, might be I did that. Could be.
Oh, he's like the Forrest Gump of serial killers.
He is cute.
Or of grave robbers, rather.
Yeah, Gein's an interesting case. It's really hard to tell. There obviously was a lot of physical evidence that corroborated his confession. So in a general way, I think that, what he was saying was accurate. It's also, a lot of, as you saw with Henry Lucas, people sometimes, put words into the mouths of some of these people. And, they sometimes just say what they think their interrogators want them to hear. But, with Gein, from all available evidence, it's likely that most of what he confessed to was true. So,
hell yeah. Good. I mean, I know that makes. I'm so saddened by
You just want to hear. You just want honesty. That is Henry's faith in humanity is strangely shattered.
Like disillusioned this whole, really feel bad now.
I'm like legitimately bummed out.
Oh man,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
No,
Next thing
you're
we're going to
correct.
find out the Grim Sleeper didn't even rest very well. No, he had a horrible time resting and sleeping. Harold, what do you think comes first, the media or the actions? Like, obviously we see a rise of mass shootings after Columbine. The way the media covered Columbine, as we've talked about extensively, was horrible and completely wrong. Almost made them, Dylan and Eric, looked like anti-heroes in a strange way.
Yeah, the whole bully narrative, which was completely wrong.
Yes, because obviously they were the bullies. And now we see this massive rise in mass shootings. The media coverage is 24/7 news. You can become a celebrity overnight. You'll be on the front pages of Rolling Stone. If you look at the Sharnov, the man behind the Boston Marathon bombing, one of them. Do you think that what's media's role in provoking true crime or provoking violence? Do you give any credence to the notion that they are sort of helping move along what we're seeing right now?
Well, they're obviously, copycat killers and so on and so forth. But, the media, well, some of the more legitimate medias in the business of transmitting the news, and, the more exploitive tabloid media, I don't think it promotes crime. I think, again, they're in the business of giving the audience the stories it wants to hear. The fact is, people are fascinated by this stuff. People didn't want to read about all this stuff or watch cable news about it or listen to podcasts about it. The media would just stop supplying those stories. So I don't think we can, I feel very strongly, that the media, it's like, complaints about, movies inspiring crimes and so on. The media has, I think, very limited power in determining what kind of stories the public wants to hear. And you see that like with any blockbuster movie, well, with any big budget movie, that's a total flop.
Yeah.
Right.
People think like Hollywood, has this like mind control thing over the audience, and can just instill all this stuff in the audience. But if the audience isn't interested in seeing, the new Terminator movie, they're just not going to go see the new Terminator movie. It's not like Hollywood could make you see the new Terminator movie. So,
Right.
Well, it's the narrative around Joker. Remember Joker came out, and the narrative around it was they're like, it's going to inspire people to start shooting people at the movie theaters. Up to a point where I was like, I think you want people to shoot people at the movie theaters because then it shows that you're right and that the Joker is to blame somehow, even though it's just a much too skinny Joaquin Phoenix.
It's a fun movie. Like,
I love Joker.
I loved it. Like,
It's all right. It could have been funnier for a movie about a comedian, but
well, I remember I just reading it when Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho came out. There was all this stuff about, who was going to inspire a rash of like psychos doing horrible things to women. So, people.
And they didn't realize you just had to just sit back and dudes were going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, there was. I mean, I know like Luca Magnotta said that like American Psycho was one of his favorite movies, but but he also loved like Basic Instinct. He loved Mickey Mouse. Like these guys are into what they're going to be into, and they're going to do what they're going to do. I think no matter what, these guys are going to do what they're going to do. They're not going to be inspired by anything or spurred on by anything. They may gravitate towards that stuff, but I don't think they're to blame.
I based my entire comedy career off of Grandpa from House of a Thousand Corpses, and I found that the stand-up bits that he did in that movie only worked with a certain audience.
Well, people have a very simplistic view of the relationship between popular media and human behavior. Mostly, it's appealing to certain kinds of fantasies that people have, often forbidden and taboo fantasies that they need some outlet for. And the other thing is what I've discovered with psychopathic killers, you don't know what's going to set them off. I mean, Charles Manson, ordered the Sharon Tate murders after listening to the Beatles' White Album, which is one of the most benign pieces of pop culture ever created. The guy who shot John Lennon was inspired by Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye.
Right.
You don't know what's going to set off a psycho. And as opposed to the vast mass audience, this stuff is allowing them to indulge in certain kinds of possibly forbidden fantasies and daydreams that they do need some kind of outlet for.
Right.
So,
well, I guess sort of in that vein, when it comes to nature versus nurture, what do you weigh more? Do you think these are genetically flawed people, or do you think it has to also be a kind of a perfect environment to cultivate a serial killer?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of both. I mean, I've come more and more to believe that one, common denominator among most of these kinds of criminals is being subjected from their earliest childhoods to extreme forms of humiliation.
Yeah.
Logical, sexual, physical, emotional. I mean, I think there has to be some other element, some neurological element. So in that sense, it's probably a combination of nature and nurture. But the nurture thing is definitely a key component to it.
So going to one of your most recent books, Hell's Princess, the story of Belle Gunness. So you mentioned earlier that that you taught a class in myth. Was it kind of the myth of Belle Gunness that drew you to the story,
or was it the sex appeal?
That's good. That's what's going to put people in seats, Henry.
Well, she apparently had something going for her.
Yeah.
But, I had become very interested in the whole topic of female serial murderers years ago, and I wrote a book called Fatal about Jane Toppin, who was a nurse who confessed ultimately to murdering 31 people and was considered to be, at one point, America's most, she was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as America's most prolific serial killer before John Wayne Gacy. So
what they do, Guinness Book of World Records will be like, he put a Sprite cap on his elbow and walked for a mile fast. Well, I didn't know they did like serial killers. It's always like egg carton racing or something weird like that.
I haven't read it for a while, but that they do have records of everything, and they had, again, most prolific serial murderer. But anyway, I became very interested in female serial killers. And
did they send her the damn plaque that you get? I'm actually a little bit. I didn't know
it's just a book of records.
But you literally get a plaque that's like, congratulations.
You have to everyone. They still have like the fastest 100-meter race, the fastest.
Okay. But if I'm this chick, I'm demanding a frickin' plaque.
Yeah, well, maybe, although she'd probably been dead for about 50 years, but still.
Okay, all right, fine.
I was very interested in the Belle Gunness case because, unlike virtually every other female serial killer that I'm aware of, she also, chopped up these guys. That was a very unusual feature for a female serial killer. They're just usually content with, poisoning them and watching them suffer horrible deaths. And not just chopping them up afterward.
So with Belle Gunness, when you were writing this book, of course, we did a series on Belle Gunness not too long ago, and big question,
because of the new book, we were so excited. It's nice and it's a nice and thick.
Yeah, it's great. But with Belle Gunness, the question is at the end is what happened to Belle Gunness? Where did Belle Gunness go? So when you started writing this book, did you think, I'm going to fucking figure this out, man. I'm going to be the guy?
I did think that. I did. I thought I would solve it. At one point, I thought I had actually solved it because I came, when I work on my books like that, I hire a genealogist to help me do research and stuff. Anyway,
that's the key. That's the real key. I want to ask you literally about your whole process, if you don't mind, at some point being how the hell do you get so much deep dive? But continue with the story.
Yeah. Anyway, so I came across a woman who had moved to Wisconsin shortly after Belle Gunness's farm burnt down, and she was using a name that was one of Belle Gunness's aliases. that Bell had used when she put some of these matrimonial ads in the newspapers. So I was pretty sure that I had actually located Belle Gunness and determined that she had escaped.
Well, that is a great place for Belle to go. She's a Wisconsin 11. She's perfect for Wisconsin. You can go cow tipping with her. You can drink beers with her.
Yeah. No, Wisconsin, it's like a hotbed of these psychos. But anyway.
But it's so cold there.
It is cold. Anyway, it turned out that my genealogist discovered that I was completely wrong about this. So
Damn it.
Oh.
God damn it.
I was very unhappy that it kind of unresolved at the end. One thing, I hate ambiguity. Just to let you know.
Right.
That was going to be my question. Like, do you prefer the mystery or certainty? And so it's certainty.
No, I would have loved to have been able to solve it. And then at the end, there was that woman, Esther Carlson, as you may remember. The people were absolutely convinced was Belle Gunness. They even, shipped people from LaPorte who had known Belle to look at her corpse, and they all swore it was Belle Gunness. But then I think I mentioned there was some researcher from Norway. He has a YouTube presentation on this, who discovered definitively that Esther Carlson wasn't Belle.
Yes.
Then there were some people who had gotten permission to exhume the skeletal remains of the body that supposedly was Belle's, that was buried in Chicago. And they ran some DNA tests, but those came back, very indefinite. So, it remains a mystery. And my opinion of it keeps changing. Sometimes I'm sure she died in the fire. Other times, some people write me with certain facts that convince me she did get away. So I'm completely of two minds about it.
Where are you at like today? Where are you at with it?
Same place I've always been at. No, I mean, it's weird. I mean, I can't remember a time when I felt so equally split between two completely opposing conclusions,
Right.
Every time I have reason to think one is true, something will convince me that the other one is equally plausible. So
do you complete all of your research before you start writing, or is it sort of a in tandem process? And if it's in tandem, have you ever gotten to like near the end of the book and been like, this I don't have an end?
Well, I do a lot of it before I start writing. I mean, the bulk of it before I start writing. But inevitably, as I'm writing, unforeseen things come up, that will necessitate further research or lead me along. And when I was writing, I wrote a book called The Mad Sculptor about this guy, Robert Irwin, committed this horrific triple murder in New York City in 1937. And I did all this incredible research on Irwin, in the Library of Congress and all these places, started writing the book. And then I started coming across references to these other crimes that had happened right before Bob Irwin's crimes, in the same neighborhood as his crime. So that, I had to kind of stop in my tracks and start researching those other crimes to put this certain kind of context, So things like that happen pretty frequently.
Can I ask this is a more general question about true crime in a world. Do you ever feel that do these subjects affect your personal life in any way, shape, or form? Because we've covered some of the darker aspects of these stories. Sometimes, I mean, they fuck with us all the time. Like last year, we did kind of a perspective on Joseph Mengele from like a true crime perspective, like looking at him like as a criminal essentially. And then of course you're looking at his true crimes, which is that he was a cog inside of the death machine of Auschwitz. So as you're going through it, it wasn't like we at first were like, oh, this will be an interesting way to cover this story. And as you do it, you're like, oh, this is like ruining our lives. This is a terrible experience. Like, have you experienced that in any way, shape, or form?
I did. I experienced that when I was writing my book on Albert Fish.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Well, we experienced that when we were doing our episode on Albert Fish. It's a fucking awful story.
And, I have two daughters. My daughter, grown women, but they were young. They were basically, roughly the same age as Grace Budd was at that time. yeah, that was a hard book for me to write. It was a hard book for me to write because of, what Fish was doing, but also, I mean, to some extent, in order for me to write my books, and this was more true in the past than it is now, but I had to go to some very dark places in my own psyche in order to really understand the people I was writing about.
Yeah.
So, that can be obviously a disconcerting experience. But just reading, Fish's confessions and, I mean, the guy was torturing children. So that was the toughest book for me to write.
Yeah.
When people ask me that question, which they sometimes do, I sort of compare my experience to what I imagine a medical student is like, where like, the first few times you dissect a corpse, is this incredibly disturbing experience. And after a while, you're like eating lunch while you're doing it. So, to some extent, you become a little, not inured exactly, but, accustomed to it.
Right.
So, yeah.
So moving on to another killer, like as a former professor, how would you rate Carl Panzram's writing abilities?
Yeah, well, Panzram, was, I know, I wrote this introduction to this Panzram, autobiography. Yeah, he was kind of a remarkable person. I mean, he was obviously terrifying, but, very, very smart. Again, as I remember, it's been a while since I read them. It's hard to know, though, how much he was being edited by the guy who published it, whose name I can't remember, but who also wrote the Birdman of Alcatraz book. So sometimes, I mean, it does sound very authentic, but it might have been cleaned up a little, by the guy who wrote it, whose name I can't remember.
Right. Well, I guess sort of on that similar vein, do you have someone that you're most intrigued by? Any, either someone you've covered or someone you would like to cover? Well, I don't like to use the term favorite serial killer because I just we hate all of them. They're horrible scumbags. And what's the most intriguing or fascinating person you've covered or want to cover?
Well, I mean, the fascination with Ed Gein never grows old.
Yeah.
Also, kind of an interesting figure because I was just talking to somebody, who'd read my book recently. Of all the serial killers I've covered, well, first of all, Gein, I don't think falls into the serial killer category.
Serial crafter.
Well,
Yes.
yeah, it was kind of an outsider artist, I think.
Yeah, he's going to Hobby Lobby. He's protesting their gay stance on marriage.
He wasn't a sadistic sex killer, right? The way Fish was and all the, Gacy and Bundy and all that. Basically, he was a necrophile, really. He just ran out of like available corpses. So, he had to make a couple of his own. So, but I mean, the two women he killed, and again, not condoning it, but they were very swift executions. He wasn't into getting off on torturing them and so on, their suffering. And yeah, I mean, Gein is just this incredibly, fascinating figure, not only in terms of his psychopathology, but, some weird way that, there's something atavistic about Gein's crimes. It's like you're stepping into this world of pagan religion, where, Aztec sacrifices where they skin, flay victims and wear their skin and, just all that stuff. Gein, has been behind what I consider the three most terrifying horror movies of the modern era. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, and Silence of the Lambs. There's something very, very resonant about his case. And I think that'll always be true.
His private world, it all happened inside of his own mind almost. I've been endlessly fascinated about the idea of the connection between serial killers and people like Ed Gein. I mean, whatever we'll just call Ed Gein serial killer for shorthand. in their homes. And the idea of when some of them, the ones that operate inside of their own, the only word I could really use is lair, of they compartmentalize physically their own mind. Like Ed Gein's home is so fascinating to me. The whole house is in disarray, filled with fucking human viscera, all this bullshit, and then but his mother's room is pristine. And like how, same thing with like Gacy, how that rumpus room was where shit went bad. Like the rest of the house was kind of off limits from bad behavior. It was when he entered literally into a subterranean cave when he became a monster. It becomes what you talked about, the idea of these people becoming mythic.
Well, speaking of media as well, Henry, this is something that we may have brought into the world. HGTV is working on a new reality show where you can buy the houses of serial killers and murderers.
They're going to flip them.
They're going to start flipping those houses.
It's a murder house flip show. I think it's actually called like Flip the Murder House.
I think it's called Murder House Flip.
Murder House Flip.
And we talked about this about 2 years ago in jest, being like, well, we know society is going to be crumbling when they make this show. And then look at, they made it.
Yeah, well, it could be good. Like if people have trouble selling their houses, they could just like lure a lot of people there and kill them and then sell their house.
Now you're the real estate agent we need.
Like instead of location, it's corpse.
So with Ed Gein's crimes, with the murders of Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, like Ed Gein always said that he blacked out when that he doesn't remember actually committing those crimes. Like, do you think that Ed Gein truly did black out and that it was just some sort of like inner desire that was driving him, or do you think he said, "I'm going to get a live one now"?
First of all, with Gein, and one thing about Gein that differentiates him, from most serial murderers, is that he was psychotic. Most serial murderers, are psychopaths. They're not psychotic. Gein was having hallucinations, and he was, he was schizophrenic. So it's hard to know what's going on in his mind at those moments. My take on, there's a Freudian term, overdetermined. Freud used it to mean that there's just not one simple cause of a neurosis or something. It's a complex of things. With killing people like Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden, there's obviously on the one, some, again, to be Freudian, some other thing going on there.
Oh yeah, he needed something about mommy. It's something about being inside of mommy.
Yeah, well, it was more. It's like, oh, Bernice and Mary, that's bad mommy.
That's bad mommy.
Good mommy's dead. Bad mommy's alive. Now bad mommy needs to be dead too.
If the last words I hear are "you're bad, mommy," and then I get shot in the head, I'm gonna be real mad.
And again, because he was a classic necrophile. I think he, at the point at which he was running low on, available corpses of elderly women in the local graveyards, he had to go out and make a couple. So
I do like the idea of a classic grave robber or corpse fucker. I guess that's what we could call him. He's like, I just think of like Humphrey Bogart and like Casablanca, very fancy, smoking a cigarette, real cool, very chill, classic.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that in mind. But if you look at, for example, Kraft Ebbing's Psychopathia Sexualis, which was this classic book of criminal aberration and sexual aberration. He has a section on necrophiles. And Gein fits the profile, except for the fact that we don't know if he actually had sex with them. As you know from his confession, he said he was put off by the smell, which suggests that, he was at least thinking about it anyway.
I feel like the only time he ever came was on accident, and then he put himself in the bathroom for a week and shamed himself. Just hung out in the tub.
Yep, just sitting there talking about the smell, eating a slice of apple pie with a piece of cheddar cheese on top.
Loving his life.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons, again, it's possible to feel a modicum of sympathy for Gein is, most of his victims were already dead. There were corpses that he exhumed. And the two women that we know for sure he killed, he executed swiftly as opposed to, again, subjecting them to these horrible tortures in the way that Gacy, Bundy, et cetera, did. So.
Right.
I mean, do you think? I mean, I know that this is a question that many people have asked you a million times, but do you think he killed his brother?
Yeah, that's a good question. I tend to think he probably did not kill his brother. Yeah, it's hard to know, but it doesn't quite seem to fit in with his MO. I think it's equally as likely that often when these kinds of killers are caught, people immediately attribute retroactively all these other mysterious crimes to them. Killing his brother, again, does seem to me to be a little inconsistent with the kinds of crimes that Gein committed. And again, given the circumstances of his death and what was going on at the time, it does seem equally as likely to me that Henry died of a heart attack or, smoke inhalation or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I know they tried with Ed Gein, they tried putting all sorts of disappearances. But that was the funny thing about Wisconsin around that time is so many people were going missing.
They were going to Los Angeles to make it big in Hollywood.
Like there was a little girl that disappeared. There was a guy that disappeared on a hunting trip. Like there were a lot of people going missing in the Midwest during that time period.
It's called the Midwest divorce. You go hunting and never come back.
When I went there to do my research, I was told that area of Wisconsin had a higher per capita murder rate than New York City at the time. Of course, I mean, they had very few people there in general, but per capita, people did often disappear in those woods. It was a little bit of a scary place.
Do you have any serial killer memorabilia? Do you go as far as to collect?
No, I don't. I mean, I have a couple of things that have been gifted to me, but no, I'm not a collector. What I do is when I'm writing a book, I do like to often have some kind of object that's connected to the case I'm writing about on my desk as whatever. So, for example, the book I just finished on the Bath school disaster, the Bath school disaster, there was this guy, it took place in a little town called Bath, Michigan in 1927, and a guy named Andrew Kehoe, who was a respected member of the community, was on the school board, rigged their public school. They had this shiny new public school.
This is a crazy story.
Yeah,
this story's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Anyway, he rigged the basement of the school with all this World War I surplus dynamite, which had been sold to farmers in the form of something called pyritol. Pyritol looked just like dynamite, but it was a less potent explosive, and it was being sold to farmers so they can get rid of tree stumps and so on and so forth. Anyway, Kehoe purchased like 500 pounds of this stuff and rigged the basement of the school with it and blew the school up on the last day of school.
Crazy.
He intended to destroy the whole school, and if he had, he would have killed basically the entire juvenile population of the town.
Good Lord.
He ended up killing like 40 children, though. And some children. Anyway, so I can show it to you. Wait, hold on a second. I was looking around eBay, and I don't know if you can see it.
Whoa, cool.
Part of a pyritol container of the exact thing that Andrew Kehoe would have used.
That's fun as shit. That's fun as shit. That's a great piece of memorabilia, and it's not like fully morbid, but it's morbid adjacent.
Yeah.
What is it with having one of the objects near you while you write? What's the
it just sort of in a way takes me to the place I'm writing about.
Yeah.
You could see it in his hands. You could see him loading up the all of the explosives. All of a sudden, you're in front of an elementary school. You don't know how you got there. You've lined the whole thing with explosives. You've been writing in your journal, I'm going to do it again. You've become Andrew Kehoe.
Yeah, it doesn't quite go that far, though that's actually kind of a cool plot.
Oh, yeah.
So, Harold, what has it been like for you over the last 20 years or so to see true crime become not only like socially acceptable, but kind of hip?
Yeah. No, it's, it's been very, very interesting. When I first started writing it, it was still such a disreputable genre that I couldn't even get Deviant published in hardcover. Publisher would only insist on doing it, as a kind of paperback that would have been sold in Greyhound bus stations and stuff like that. So, seeing it, turn into this major cultural thing, well, it makes me feel I was ahead of my time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I know you said in an email that you wrote to us that your fans have been changing lately.
Oh, well, I just wrote because owing, I think, to a large extent to the publicity that you guys have given me, I seem to, people like a younger, well, your age, like,
We are not young, but we are not young.
We're pushing 40.
There are these, like, I went into a framing shop not too long ago to get something framed. I can't remember what. And the young woman behind the counter, hair dyed blue, et cetera, said, wow, I just heard, they were just talking about you on last podcast on the left and so on and so forth. So, yeah. So thanks to you guys, I am now being recognized by an entire new generation of people.
That's great, man. Hopefully you get some free beers, some free tacos. That's the best. That's the most you can ask for.
That's just all I want.
Occasionally, you'll get something for free.
It's really, really very nice when it happens. I think it's also because of the tone in which that you write, which I think attracted us, which is this idea that it doesn't have to be dry and serious for you to tastefully talk about these morbid facts. You can throw some fucking, I don't know what it is. There's entertainment value in there, which is why we get into this topic to begin with.
Right. Well, also, you guys, I'd like to think to a certain extent, me too, bring your personalities to bear on this stuff. Again, it's about storytelling, right? It's about how you tell the stories. And whether the way you tell the stories is going to resonate with the audience. So, you guys do that, brilliantly in your way. I like to think, I have my own voice when I write my book. So,
of course, The Ragged Stranger. It is absolutely in your voice. It's a great read.
Yeah. Are there any people that you don't like their presentation? You dislike the presentation?
We can't talk shit on the mic. We gotta
Nancy
say, I want
Grace?
real
I can't talk
juice.
about Nancy
No, I want
Grace?
real juice. We can't talk about real gossip. I want the real gossip after the show.
No.
I'm not, again, I am old. I'm not a big podcast listener. There are two things I dislike, in true crime. One is, when people just embellish or speculate too much. I'm talking about written true crime. Maybe this happened. It's possible.
Right.
So I was thinking this. I don't really know what the dialogue was, but I'm imagining this is what they might have said to each other. That kind of thing.
Yeah. We got in trouble once for criticizing a writer for doing that too much. Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you ever read the Dune series?
Oh, my God. You're not going to bring up Dune, Henry.
I read the original Dune many years ago.
Nah.
I liked the David Lynch version.
Yeah, buddy. That's what I'm saying.
But, and I saw the documentary about the Jodorowsky project that never came to be.
Yeah,
but I never read any of the ones beyond the first one.
Jodorowsky invented the summer blockbuster. I love that documentary. It's really amazing. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking for anybody to talk to about Dune.
Well, I guess the last kind of question that I have is, and it's a little bit corny, but if you had to be killed by any of these serial killers, who would you want to be killed by?
Are you going to hit him with a fuck, marry, kill?
No, that's not no. This is the absolute opposite. He is going to be killed by them, and he's not going to have sex with them or marry them.
Yeah, I guess one that wouldn't spend like a really long time torturing me.
You wouldn't just want one sweet embrace from Belle Gunness just to see what all the hubbub was about, just for a second, just to see what her Swedish kisses were like.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go with Albert Fish there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, man. We've been talking to Harold Schechter. If you have not read any of his books, please go out there, support this man. He is grandfather offensive to say the grandfather of true crime? Are we that the father of true crime in,
Does Marcus
in the
have
literary
anything else?
sense?
Do you have anything else you want to pepper the man with while we got him captive?
I just, thank you so much for writing so many fantastic books that have captivated us and inspired us throughout the years. I don't know if Last Podcast would be the show that it is without you. So just,
that means a lot to me. And thank you guys for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Live from your grave.
All right, there it was, our interview with Harold Schechter. That was awesome.
That was absolutely wonderful. That was so cool.
Do you feel satisfied, Marcus?
I feel yes, I feel satisfied. It was great to hear from him. And of course, if you want to read his new release, it's called The Ragged Stranger, and it's available on Kindle. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free. So just go and check it out, download it. You can read it in a couple hours. It's just a nice little bite-sized true crime story. I loved it, especially if you were into the Scott Peterson case. It's fun to see. It's fun to read a story. It's like, oh, this is if Scott Peterson had actually done it.
Damn.
Wow. That's a very hot topic that you just dropped very lightly, Marcus, but I'm very excited. One day we will do that series. I don't know when we will, but it is in the pipeline, and I'm very excited.
So you think Scott Peterson is innocent?
Yeah.
Wow.
Really?
Well, let's just, all right, great.
Wow.
Leave your replies in the comments. I'm certain this will be great.
That's amazing. Well, we gotta get into that.
And I don't do social media, so you're just going to have to take it.
Oh, my God. Wow. Well, Dateline told me he was guilty. I'm going to have to go back and see what Stone Phillips had to say.
Nancy
Holy
Grace
shit.
was wrong about something?
I don't know. No, that comes out of nowhere. I still think he did it. I'm not going to die on this hill. I don't have enough information.
All right, you fuckers, we are about to be all around you, all near you, April
All
2020.
around.
We're coming. Get your tickets at lastpodcastontheleft.com. Pick up them dates, whatever's closest to your home. Don't you want to see my body dance and jiggle?
It definitely dances and it definitely jiggles.
We have a ton of shows coming up. It's going to be New York City on the 7th. This is all starting in April.
Okay.
You can go and check out lastpodcastontheleft.com to get the exact dates. It's going to be New York City, Boston, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, Durham, North Carolina, Atlanta, Chicago. 2 shows in Chicago.
Sweet.
We added an extra show in Chicago.
Because they legalized weed. See, now you get us twice.
That's right. We had Nashville, St. Louis, Houston, Austin, Dallas, Lubbock, Denver, Phoenix, Las Vegas, San Francisco, and Los Angeles.
And now it's time for Marcus to talk to Lubbock.
Lubbock. Went out on a limb for you. Really went out on a limb. So we need to do Lubbock this tour. I need you to come, Lubbock. I very much need you to come to the show. We need you to come to the show. And we need you to come out and buy tickets for this one. So come on out if you're in New Mexico, if you're in Oklahoma, if you're anywhere in West Texas, come on out to Lubbock and buy tickets to that show. And if you're in Houston, come on out to that show as well. And Las Vegas as well. We need some people to come out in Las Vegas.
All right.
So you guys come on out, buy your tickets. They're available over on lastpodcastonTheLeft.com.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, you fuckers, come and see us, man. Come see the Lubbock and Vegas are 2 spots that we've been asked for forever to come see shows, and we got our first our numbers back and we're doing very well, except in those 2 places.
Yep.
Well, that I think they buy the tickets late because they never know. You never know when Carrot Top's going to have a hot hit. You don't know when Penn and Teller are going to be, premiering.
I know you
want to
be available. I get you want to be available.
You got to be available.
I get it. But come on, Lubbock. Come on out.
They'll come on
Come
out.
on.
We can't wait. Come on.
And put my money where my mouth is. I told everyone we got to go to Lubbock. People come out to shows in Lubbock. No, come on out.
You know, we always put our money where our mouth is, and it always works out great.
I'm so sick.
All right,
I
everyone,
feel
thank you
so sick.
Thank you all so much for listening.
Can't wait to do a show for my mom.
Oh,
your
just
mom is
mommy.
gonna love it.
That would be so cute if it was just us and your mom. Just her staring, going, being like, I thought they had a professional show, but I didn't know how good they got it, how handsome my son was.
Honestly, if we just had Marcus's mom, we would put on a great show, and that's the only audience we need.
That's right.
Isn't that nice? Okay, everyone, Happy New Year. Hope your 2020 has started off all right. If not, hang on in there. We got a whole year to go.
Yeah, we do.
Hopefully a year after that and a few after that too, but we got a whole one to go. That's
whole
the thing with
fucking year,
January. We were just looking. It's like the movie Free Solo. We're just looking to the mountain. We're on the bottom of the mountain right now.
Time is a construct. It doesn't matter.
Well, it definitely does because Marcus always gets mad at me when I'm late. But now I can say that.
Well, no, I mean the abstract.
You got it. When there is a, it's just when there's a
appointments
time
are
crunch.
very real.
Time is a construct, my friend.
God damn it,
Appointments
man.
are real. Time's a construct.
What? All I know is a wizard is never late. It arrives exactly when it intends to. Okay, everyone, hail yourselves.
Hail Satan.
Hail Gein.
Magustalations.
Hail me if you would, hail me.
Henry, who would you like to be killed by?
You know me, man. I say just fucking Catherine Knight.
Ooh.
That first thing, I know that she horribly murdered him, but right before that seemed like a lot of fun.
Yeah, okay, good choice.
Sure.
This show is made possible by listeners like you. Thanks to our ad sponsors, you can support our shows by supporting them. For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to lastpodcastnetwork.com.